Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. GMT. We are back. We are going to be discussing everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money online. I'm your host, BTC. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. And we're going to get into everything that's been happening over the weekend in what can only be described as a mental market. So much stuff going on the shitcoin side of things, so much stuff going on crypto and in NFTs too. We're going to get into all of that and more. But just a reminder before we do that, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We don't know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Monday. It is the 18th of March. It is 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. GMT. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Per se, I'm doing quite well. I do feel a bit confused, admittedly, when you're used to a certain time slot for more than 200 shows and suddenly everything happens 1 hour earlier. It is a weird feeling. Like I did have a bit of an early lunch with a little snack before the show, like I typically do, and then I realized it is quite early to actually do that. So it is weird, but I'm curious to see how this experiment will turn out in terms of numbers, because I think it will give us a good indication if people default to Eastern time or to BST or any other kind of European time zone for our show.
I agree. I agree with you on all fronts. I think it's important for us to get back into that 7 a.m. time slot just to see if that suits us best. But the second thing on like 1 hour in the day moving, like I was running the Thread Guy spaces every day last week, 1 hour earlier than normal. And it just makes you like 1 hour just out of schedule can really, really impact just how your day flows. It makes a huge difference. So I sympathize there. It definitely makes a big difference. We got a lot of messages. Shout out to Curtis in the audience. Curtis Coffee giving us the distinct, no uncertain message that we got to go back to the usual schedule because his commute was not working out without us on the show. But we got a bunch of messages like that. So hopefully we can slot right back into people's usual routines. And I think in 1 week or 2 weeks time, we'll be completely back to normal. So that will be good for everyone on both sides. Sammy, how are you doing? How was your weekend? What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's good. Just trying to keep on top of all these shit coins that are being traded. But I think
so you're playing the game, aren't you? You're playing the game. You and Legendary are playing the game. I'm out of the game. But how's the game going for you so far?
It's good. It's good. Up pretty reasonably. I mean, Bohm definitely helped the initial bag, and then just from that, I've just been trying to trade it, but with smaller wins, just going for the 1 to 2x as opposed to the 100x dream shot. So. But yeah, just watching Slerf at the moment, which is quite interesting. Just listened in on the spaces this morning that had about 10,000 people sign in. Dev was crying. It's just a strange. We live in a simulation. It's just so weird.
I mean, you're gonna have to explain what's going on with the Slerf stuff in a minute. Maybe we'll like kick off with that after the headlines, because I thought it rugged. Like I thought it rugged. I thought it was dead, and then it was like ripping. I don't know if anyone perfectly knows what's going on, but fortunately you do. So we're going to hear that explanation in just a little bit. Let's get into the headlines, as always, to get you up to speed with some core price action and headlines from around the space in the last 24 hours. And then we will get into a bit of a discussion on meme coins, a bit of a discussion on some opportunities over on Bitcoin at the moment, because I think that's important. And then we'll get into the bigger discussion around the headlines themselves. So let's do it, starting with the snapshot, which is pinned up top. As always, if you find that it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let's get into it. Price action. Bitcoin is up a couple of percent at 67.9. I think it's dropped down to as low as 65 at one point over the weekend. ETH up a percent at 3.6, just under 3.6K. Solana up 11% at 206. We're going to have to talk Solana on this show next. In terms of the headline, Solana hits $200. That's up 10% in 24 hours and 35% on the week. Number 2, Ordinals bounce big. Nodemonkes flip Bored Apes. at a $500 million market cap. Runestones are at a $340 market cap. They came out at 0.01, I think, and are now up to 0.04 Bitcoin. OMBs and puppets are $173 million market cap. And actually, the Dog WIF Hat, this was old news. The dog had a current bid of 1,200 ETH. That's $4.3 million. That was a bid on Foundation. That went through to GCR. So the Dog WIF Hat meme has sold as an NFT produced by the actual owners of the dog, actually, sold for $4.3 million. What a humongous win for the owners, and a nice way for them to participate in the upside of the crazy meme coin that has taken place. Now, getting into some floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks at 48.9, Bored Apes at 13.8, down 4%, Mutants at 2.2, DGods down 1% at 1.5, Captains at 3.9, Azuki at 3.8, Penguins down 1% at 10.5, Mad Lads finally experiencing something, down a few percent at 174 SOL. They'd been rock solid at 190 for a while, but Solana has been completely ripping. And the Nouns winning bid is at 5.2 ETH. Some notable sales: Quantum Cats sold for 1.9 Bitcoin. That's one of the ones that will be transferable into a wizard. A Nodemonk hoodie sold for 1.35 BTC, and a CryptoPunk sold for 56 ETH. That was the top CryptoPunk sale in the last 24 hours. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Is there anything catching your attention, catching your eye before we talk meme coins, before we talk Bitcoin opportunities, and before we get into the headlines?
Holy shit, where to even start? Probably the massive rebound we've seen with Ordinals is the one that I'm having my eye on, especially as I've been a buyer over the last week. I also been a liquidity provider. I was a bit unlucky on that.
Okay.
In the sense that my loans that I was giving out all expired today. So basically after the rebound, so nobody defaulted because floor prices went up, but everyone probably would have defaulted a couple days ago. But that's the most significant bounce back, like apart from other movements that I've been watching, smalls being down after BOEM has been down a bit too. I think they did run up to 0.7, went all the way back down to 0.2. Some other floor price action. But I think for me, the most significant, again, would be the rebound in Ordinals.
Okay, let's just go into it then and talk about that, because I think that will be an interesting place to start, given that the other interesting topics are related to Ordinals. So we'll get into that after. You mentioned two things. You said you've been a buyer up till now, and you've also were unlucky on the liquidity providing. What have you been buying? What have you been looking at? Which collections in particular are interesting you most? And then second, explain, like, to the people wondering, like, what does liquidity providing mean when it comes to NFTs on Bitcoin? Like, explain that and explain why you think that you were unlucky. So first, the collections.
Collections question is very, very easy to answer. Mostly been looking at the Nodemonkes, at the puppets, and also at the Netcats, like as a bit of the smaller place, so to speak, because I've been using Liquidium over more than a single wallet, and I didn't want to like splurge on every wallet and have some where I just provide a small loan for a Netcat. They were like down to 0.03, I think, or something like that. No, 0.003, sorry. Still takes a bit of time to get used to the amount of zeros after the comma or the point in English denomination with BTC. And in terms of why I think that I've been like quote unquote unlucky, what is happening with Liquidium, very simple NFT or ordinal lending protocol. You can either be on the lending side of capital, or you can borrow against your ordinal. And most of those loans are very, very short term. Like I think they do range between 7 to 16 days. Liquidium is also like still in the beta version, and the interest that you can earn on them is quite high for those like short amounts. For example, looking at Bitcoin puppets right now, it is a 12-day loan. LTV ratio is at 60%, and you do earn 2.6% interest over those 12 days, which is quite a lot if you were to look at it as an annualized rate. And to me, also the interesting part of it is that you can earn points by doing that. There's not a lot of people using that protocol. If you use Magic Eden as your ordinal wallet, you even earn a 1.25x multiplier on your points on top of that.
Good
so
point.
This is why I've been, on the one hand, been enjoying using the platform. On the other hand, obviously with that correction, I had my hopes up that some of the people would default and I would get my hands on 1 to 2 cheap Nodemonkes, which didn't happen. But at least I made some nice points, and also I've been on the buying side of things. So I did buy Bitcoin Puppets and Netcats. Didn't buy a Nodemonk yet.
Interesting stuff. It's interesting that those collections that you mentioned seem to be the ones that have kind of captured the mindshare most. I agree with you on that. The only thing that I think missing from your mindshare at the moment are these runestones. The runestone narrative seems very, very interesting. I want to talk about that in a little bit, but just to provide a bit more context for people, Tyler had this tweet. I'm going to share it for the people watching in, and we'll talk about it for the people listening in. The Bitcoin NFT market is electric this weekend. Runestones have already seen 525 Bitcoin of volume since Friday, now up to a 0.042 Bitcoin floor, and they were going at like 0.01 when they first came out on Friday. Other sets are pumping too. Nodes were up 60% to 0.64. They're actually up to 0.8 now. Bitcoin Puppets up 40% to 0.21. I think they've actually pulled back a touch. Natcat's up 60% to 0.06 as well. Legendary, given that you've been like looking at these collections closely as well, and it's interesting that what you've said exactly maps the kind of key collections that Tyler was talking about as well, maybe except for the runestones, which we'll talk about in a bit. Why do you think these few collections in particular have kind of risen to prominence on Bitcoin so far?
I'm probably not sure if I'm the right person to answer that, but I'll try my best as someone who's like rather new to that ecosystem.
Well, interestingly, then I think the way that the reason why I'm interested in your perspective then is exactly because you're someone newer to the thing and you've gone to those. So are you just reading other people's signals, thinking like, well, these seem to be the ones that people talk about, so that's what I'm going to do, or do you have you developed your own kind of thesis on it?
Nodemonkes, kind of in my view, right, in my perception, kind of a bit of the CryptoPunks equivalent. They did run up pretty high, so I was like, yup, that makes sense to me as the top collection. I think a lot of volume on that also solidified that. For the Natcats, I did see the protocol, again, don't ask me the name of it, that they are building or they are being built on. Also lower entry price, very low entry price, so it kind of makes sense that once people are starting to get priced out of a Nodemonk or other things, to have a cheaper collection that's also a good runner-up. And realistically speaking, Bitcoin Puppets are still very expensive. Like 0.2 BTC is not a joke, so they wouldn't fulfill like my cheaper entry point criterion for a collection that I wanted to have exposure to.
Okay, that all makes a lot of sense to me. Interesting to see. I've noticed this a few times. Bitcoin Puppets seem to trade in a range of like 1/3 of a Nodemonk. I don't know if other people have realized that, or whether that's accurate all the time. But now that Nodemonks have pushed up to like 0.75, Bitcoin Puppets are actually at 0.25. So that's an interesting ratio for me to watch for some reason. I've been kind of monitoring that recently. So that's something I've been watching. I just want to give a quick shout out to OMBs as well that might not have been kind of in the conversation so far, maybe because the floor price has decreased, but obviously the mechanic that's going on with OMBs is slightly different, right? So I'm just going to share the collection with people who are watching in and explain what's happened for the people who are listening. OMBs obviously went as high as like 1.5 or something like that in the last week or so. But that was in advance of this Orange Eyes collection. Now the floor price, the headline floor price is down to 0.48, which you might think, well, that sounds really bad because it's a lot lower. But the additional supply, as in the Orange Eyes, has been added into the exact same collection with the green eyes, with the, I'm just going to make up other colors. I think it's the red eyes. Are there blue eyes as well? I don't know. whatever other eyes they were in, now they're adding the orange eyes into it as well. I'm sure Jack will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, and his hand is up. So I think I got the right colors of the eyes. But that's why that floor price has come down significantly. The supply has been added into the same collection. So, and I believe a lot of those mints went to holders already. So it was kind of like free, not free for them to sell, but they acquired them at a very low price. So it was kind of easy liquidity for them to maintain the OMBs that they did have and then sell off into the market their extra ones that they accrued. So I think that makes sense. Would love to hear Jack's thoughts on the OMB market, but also just broadly the run on Ordinals, given that I know for a fact you've been messing around there for quite some time. Jack, welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts on OMBs? What are your thoughts on the big bounce across Ordinals over the weekend?
Yeah, I think talking about the bounce first, obviously with OMB, there was sort of two mechanics that people need to be aware of. It wasn't a free mint to anyone, even holders. So it was a 0.09 Bitcoin mint for holders of the previous collections. And then they also did a whitelist round, like a very, very small round to other big collections, but that was at a 0.29 Bitcoin mint. So that obviously drew a ton of liquidity out of the market, being that these are some of the OGest collections going, and people obviously were making bets there that if they didn't get the allow list, which was I really can't over exaggerate like how difficult it was to get on the allow list for this. So I think a lot of people were always going to be looking at secondary. And I think that actually what we saw was with that initial run up, we then saw a sort of a retrace based on people freeing up liquidity. On top of that, you then had runestones, and runestones were essentially a mechanic where people were dropped a NFT based on their time in the ordinal space. It was very, very concentrated to making sure the distribution was as wide as possible, and it was essentially rewarding people who'd been in the space for over a year with over 3 ordinals within their wallets. So the distribution was huge, and then that's why we saw this huge run up. But also now we're seeing that liquidity come back in. There's been a slight retrace there. You can imagine some of these OG ordinals holders had multiple wallets, especially early on, because it was actually suggested that you needed multiple wallets because of the fact that ordinals were so new. There was actually a concern that if you tried to mint too many things to the same wallet, you could essentially like over inscribe, or like there's ways you could lose your previous ordinal. So it meant people did have multiple wallets set up. So you've got those two elements essentially. You've got like the biggest mint. Think of it, if you are ETH native, think of it as like the Moonbird 2.5 ETH raffle system, where you knew if you got that raffle, you were in for a good one. But there was a huge retrace in the market that week as well, whilst people were freeing up that capital. I think it was like $8,000-9,000 where ETH was at the time. Very similar mechanic there with the 0.29 Bitcoin, $20,000 plus, depending when you minted. And then you had these runestones, which is like over 100,000 of these things were dropped. So the floor is ginormous on these. And they literally, both those forms of liquidity then re-entered as people either saw that OMB weren't going to go down any further. I think they were out the gate about a 0.1 Bitcoin ahead of the public mint at 0.29. So you're looking at like a 0.39. They're now up another 0.1 there. People have seen like the capitulation of the early minters is gone. They feel like they're either repriced out of the OMB side, or they've picked up their OMB. And now we're seeing that liquidity fall back into the market with the runestones and the drop that was made there. The same thing, as people have, maybe cut their bags a little bit, trim their bags, that is now going into those collections as well. And you're seeing that in Nodemonkes, you're seeing that in Puppets, and you're seeing that in OMB too.
Look, really helpful context, chat. I'm going to throw back to you in just a little bit, because I want to run through some people's tweets that I found on like how to play the Bitcoin NFT ecosystem, the runes ecosystem over the next couple of months, and would love to get your perspective on that. But just to add to what you said, and I think it basically sounds like there were big liquidity events for lots of people on Bitcoin over the last 48 hours. You had the runestones getting dropped to to lots of people. You had OMBs, basically everyone minting OMBs, whether you minted in public, before, whatever, like you're all up. Everyone is up across the board, and then they've gone up again. So like everyone is feeling good there, which is a great environment for people to go and spend more. In addition to all of that, I saw this again shared by Tyler, who's reporting on this, has been excellent. He said, "Did you get one of these ordinals in your wallet? Get one of these ordinals in your wallet. You're getting some PUPS token." The founder of PUPS completed a snapshot and airdrop these NFTs to Bitcoin puppet owners. They'll be redeemable for a share of 23% of the PUPS Runes token supply after the halvening. PUPS token has now soared 60% in the past few days, now at $3.67. So this airdrop meta, which was kind of existing on ETH first, like, okay, these NFT projects are dropping in order to get some ERC20 at some point. This thing is shifting over, and I guess NFTs are getting linked to these runes tokens, which will come at some point in time. Jack, are you able to speak to that a little bit? I know you know this stuff probably better than us. Is that a fair assessment of where you see some of these collections moving towards?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So yeah, for those who don't know, a lot of these like NFTs or ordinals that we're calling right now are actually linked to runes. So this runestone collection is realistically, it's like an early access to what will become runes, which essentially, this is really oversimplifying it, but for the audience, it's essentially meme coins coming to ordinals, but they're not quite ready yet. So instead of having, you know, the distribution that you'd see in a normal meme coin, you know, like a billion of them or whatever you would see, instead you get NFTs, which are almost pre-allocation to that drop, with like a much smaller supply, but obviously you will then get like a much higher allocation of the token when they come. So I think that is helping a lot of people justify, and what you've seen Legendary sort of point to is justifying these OG collections, and these collections that, even if they're not OG, they've captured the zeitgeist like puppets in a way where you can hopefully ascertain where those rune drops are going to go to, like what collections are prominent enough to get these huge meme coin drops when they come. And that's essentially what we're seeing. I think it just solidifies the market. It shows up the market because there will be liquidity events, and they're not necessarily linked to the actual ordinals, but OMB. If you look at Nodemonkes, look at puppets, these are already getting similar drops or a whitelist allocation. And I think that's the math people are doing. They're saying, look, if these projects get the highest whitelist allocation for just general ordinals, it's very, very possible that they're also going to get that similar allocation style for when runes really do drop. And I think we're looking around the halving, which is April 19th. So that's when we should just see like a huge like rocket of like all these things coming together. Meme coins on Bitcoin, like in the current market where we're seeing like shit coins just absolutely rocket, it just feels like the most obvious play if we're still in a bull market in a month's time. And obviously the real narrative for people who know is that the halving is normally the starting of the bull.
Yeah.
We're just early because people have seen that history play out in past, and they're just trying to front run even earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could be into for some wild stuff going on in the next couple of months over in Ordinals.
Very, very interesting stuff. I do want to dive into that even more, actually, because I've been seeing various smart people share their game plan for runes over the next few months. So we're going to get into that in just a little bit, and we'll kind of evaluate and see what we think about that. We'd love to throw to NFTStats Sam as well, to get his thoughts on where the ordinals is going. I've got one of his tweets up which showed Nodemonkes flipping Bored Apes for the first time, I believe. He said Nodemonkes have flipped Bored Apes after going from 0.54 to 0.78 Bitcoin floor today. Nodemonk floor is at 52,600, or it was at the time of writing, and the Bored Ape floor is at 48. Sam, would love to hear your thoughts on just general ordinals momentum at the moment, and how you're like looking at the Bitcoin ecosystem versus the other NFT ecosystems.
I think it has a little bit of a, I don't know. I mean, I think the narrative makes it interesting for having a couple assets that are going to last a little bit longer. I think the question with all this stuff is what has longevity and what is just like another, just kind of like short-term attention spurt. And Nodemonkes is kind of interesting in the sense that it's kind of being crowned as the keynote project on Bitcoin. I think the majority of this stuff is no different from anything else. I think the fact that it's on Bitcoin like doesn't make a huge difference for the fact that it's just like the current like attention flow, but attention flow can last a long time. We saw that with ETH NFTs. Jack GK over there. Sorry, buddy. I know you're the perma bull on everything, but yeah, you know, the OMB thing reminded me a lot of ETH NFTs, like in the sense that you had an airdrop, you know, the team extracted $30 million from the community. Like we've seen so many ETH projects that rallied sharply into a huge airdrop. The team extracted a ton of money, and and then that became the peak kind of for the combined project over long haul. So it's interesting because, you know, ZK is always talking about how he's different. He doesn't charge ordinals, but then you had him go out and extract $30 million from his own community. So I don't know. I find like the trends here, I don't think the fact that they're on Bitcoin make them all that different inherently, but maybe you do get a couple stories that have a little bit more longevity or have long-term longevity simply because of like being kind of like, I don't know. I hate to even say like some of the earlier projects in this protocol. So I'm always kind of trying to figure out what maintains attention over time and what doesn't. But yeah, it'd be interesting to watch this one. I personally like kind of want a Nodemonkey, and I can tell you that my buying desires tend to be reverse indicators. So, but you know, that said, it's been yeah, that's a little bit of a ramble. I just woke up. I haven't had coffee. Bear with me.
All good. Appreciate your perspective, Sam. I think you're right. Like for whatever reason, and it was something Legendary said earlier as well, where I shivered because I know I tweeted something similar and I saw it just triggered people entirely. Like I think the way Sam said it makes more sense, and in reflection, that's how I would frame it, which is like they've been crowned, whereas Legendary said they're like the CryptoPunks of Bitcoin, and the only reason that makes me squirm now is because when I wrote that same thing, got so much hate from every single person on the timeline because everyone wants to say like there can be no CryptoPunks of Bitcoin. But at the same time, the reason why I defend it is because you can have like different types of similarities, or you can share particular hallmarks of something. It doesn't mean that in its entirety it will be able to inspire like as much of a movement, be a part as much of the culture as that thing, but it can just simply be the top one, just like CryptoPunks is the top one. This is the top one on Bitcoin. So I think there's some nuance to be said there. Sam, you came off mute. Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think there's nuance. I think calling something the CryptoPunks of Bitcoin is silly. I mean, this project hasn't existed for more than 4 months, you know, and CryptoPunks are relevant because they've been around for 7 years in a time where so much stuff has come and gone, you know, and I think calling something the CryptoPunks of Bitcoin is silly. I think being more nuanced in it and saying perhaps, you know, they have the leadership role to Bitcoin, similar to Punks has to ETH or whatever. Obviously, you can't fit all that in a tweet, and that doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, calling something the CryptoPunks of anything, I've always found silly because what is specifically impressive about CryptoPunks is the fact that they've lasted 7 years in a world where everything that was once hot has become public enemy number one. I mean, look at Bored Ape Yacht Club. Like 3 years ago, you could not look at the feed without people talking about how incredible they were. 2 years ago, you couldn't look at the feed without people talking about how incredible they are. And now every single person is dunking on them, including people who own them. You know, so it's just the attention economy. It is so hard to maintain longevity in, and punks have done that. Like maybe, yeah. It's just, I think to even put something that's been around for less than half a year in that bucket is just. I think it's missing what makes them special. But that said, there are some potential crossovers, and
yeah, and we've got to be able to fit our thoughts into a tweet. So sometimes we do have
Elon's made it so you can write whatever you want, and you're even going to get more virality.
Legendary, want to give you a chance to come back on the reflection since I was mentioning what you said. Then I definitely want to get into like this runestone playbook or runestone planning. which I want to bring to everyone's attention. Legendary first.
Everything that Sam has said is perfectly right, but I just think if this is the narrative that is being shared on the timeline, and this is how people want to look at it right now, and this is the price action that we see based on that, I'm just gonna ape along for the time being. But of course, if you look at it in a more nuanced way, absolutely agree with what Sam just had said. It's just, sometimes I think you just gotta left curve those things. Like, I don't want to sidetrack the conversation, but Slerf, we will get into that, was a good lesson for me of why I should listen more to my left curve side of the brain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not listening to, I had to walk away from screens over the weekend because the timeline just got way too much for me. I was like, I either have to be completely left curve and throw my money into all these things, or I'm just going to take a time out. Like, I literally had to take a time out this weekend because it got too much for me, to be honest. Okay, I want to get into a few different smart people's tweets about runestones, because I think something is going on there, and it would be helpful to hear what people think about it. I might just go ahead and read 3 people's ideas and then go for, to open up the discussion. I know Jack will have some thoughts. I know Akin, who we've just welcomed to the stage, I know he'll have some thoughts on runestones too, being quite involved on the Bitcoin side of things. So let's go ahead and share some of these ideas, share some of these playbooks, because it's something that's going to be on our minds. So Monty, who's actually a good friend, great writer, he writes a lot on art, collects a lot of art, but he also trades and has been a reasonable investor, I believe. This was his thought on runestones. He said, I see runestones, ARSIC, and pups as the clear frontrunners in the upcoming rune season, sort of like Bonk with BOEM, but for Bitcoin. So very much like, look, these are the shit coins on Bitcoin. This is how the attention economy or the attention coins are going to work. In this new paradigm, I expect the market caps of top runes to really scramble people's minds. There's a lot of money in the Bitcoin ecosystem looking for more speculative BTC beta. They got it to an extent with Ordinals, and look what is happening there. But runes will take it to the next level. So this tweet is like about looking for Bitcoin beta. Yes, Ordinals provide that a little bit if you want to take a levered bet on Bitcoin. The argument here is that runestones, ARSIC, and pups will be sort of like Bonk, WIF, and BOEM, but for Bitcoin. So that's the first one. Number 2, and maybe Sammy, we'll come to you. I'll come to you for your thoughts on this first before we go around the panel. Renegade Master, who, if you don't know, you have to know from 2021, traded fantastically well, basically disappeared then after, because I think he did so well. He didn't need to mess around in the bear market. Shout out to Renegade Master. He tweeted this. He said, we saw many people hit 7-figure wins with the recent Solana meme coin season. Bitcoin is 15x the market cap of SOL. Most people still don't understand Rune's protocol. Meme coin season on Bitcoin is coming. Multi-billion-dollar coins are coming. Pup's market cap is currently 38 million. Okay, so that's suggesting, again, meme coin season on Bitcoin, grossly undervalued versus other kind of meme coin market caps at the moment. Final point. This was from NFT Boy, who literally wrote his game plan out for runes. And NFT Boy has been very prominent on the Bitcoin side of things for a while now. Said, hold lots of blue chip assets that will get airdrops. The list is pretty short, probably the ones that Legendary mentioned so far. Although I think Puppets, above all, have been getting the most stuff, because I hold Nodemonkes and I don't, as far as I know, unless I've been missing them, I haven't been getting as much as what I think Puppets have been getting. Move them to different wallets so you maximize yield. I suspect most runes launches will distribute to top communities. Hold some exposure to almost every pre-runes airdrop because the risk reward is quite good. Ape into what you see as the pre-runes leaders. So Puppets, Runestone, ARSIC. Again, Monk's not on this list. What the hell's going on? Okay, fine. I accept that. Farm products that will likely do runes airdrops at some point, e.g. Liquidium. That is what Legendary was speaking about before, the kind of Ordinals lending protocol on Bitcoin, which has so few users compared to protocols on Solana and ETH, which is why I'm using it too. Have some liquidity ready to ape at the first 10 runes KC launches. KC is, Jack can correct me if I'm wrong on this, just like one of the very prominent Bitcoiners who's been operating in this space, and everyone seems to hold in very, very high regard. have some liquidity ready to ape at anything else that looks interesting. Of course, that's kind of goes without saying in this market. Invest in private rounds to interesting products, blah, blah, blah. Avoid, okay, I think that's enough in terms of the game plan for runes. So a variety of ideas there, a variety of things. Sammy, wanted to come to you first to just, I know you're not like as familiar with the runes ecosystem, but again, I think that it's interesting to hear your perspective then as someone who's like a little bit on the outside, but also understanding a bit, just like what's your view digesting these game plans from different people and what they're trying to predict for what could be meme coin season on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think going back to Monty's post on the similarities, I think as humans, we like to rationalize and try and draw similarities between different or existing narratives, just so that we can maybe create a new narrative for a different chain.
Process it as well, right?
Yeah, and I think it probably will become a self-fulfilling prophecy where you have all these new, I guess, the equivalent of like an ERC20 token, but on Bitcoin, or meme tokens popping off, doing exactly the same thing. Like people's behaviors and patterns probably aren't going to change too much. I think the only difference between SOL and Ordinals or Bitcoin, so the Runestones, is probably the higher barrier to entry. I think that Solana, the UX was just so easy to use, and the cost, like I saw people putting in like $3 or $1 into these pre-sales, and they make a 20x and they just keep compounding it. So I think like you just have a lot more participants. I think Ordinals will get there. I think that the Bitcoin ecosystem is going to have that infrastructure built out, but it does have a higher cost to entry. And I think that probably will work in its favor. You're going to have people making those significant gains because of that higher friction. I do think that, I think that's just my overall view for it. And I think like I will be digging deeper into it because I think there will be a lot of stuff to be had. I do think that there is the narrative around the halvening. Like I have people, normies, that are just reading these headlines saying that, oh, the halvening's coming. That means that there's going to be a supply shock to Bitcoin. So anything on Bitcoin is going to explode. And that's just kind of like the mindset they have because it's in the mainstream media. So you could have people that aren't necessarily in the Solana ecosystem enter Ordinals if they make it in a way where you can just access a wallet, use Magic Eden, or just make it easier to entry. Okay. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays off, but I think it probably will be a slower burn. I don't think it's going to be like a 2-week frenzy. I think it'll probably take a little bit longer.
Interesting. Very, very interesting perspectives. Let's go to Jack with their hand raised, and then Akin, your hand is raised too. We'll come to you right after. Jack, what are your thoughts on the 3 perspectives shared on how meme coin season is coming to Bitcoin? Is there any one of those strategies or ideas that stand out most to you? How would you play it?
Yeah, I'm already playing it, which is get into as many OG collections as I humanly possibly can.
What do you define as OG collections on Bitcoin then? No more than 3 to 5, right? Surely.
Yeah, so you've got for me at least, you've got Quantum Cats. Okay, let me just very quickly explain what the 2 big narratives are right now, at least from my perspective. And look, Akin is like way more knowledgeable on this stuff, so can't wait to hear from Akin. I've been hitting ordinal spaces for like the past sort of couple of weeks and just absorbing everything I can, but some of these guys have really just been in it the whole freaking time. So really, there's 2 narratives with ordinals. There's the narrative of the people who inscribed really, really early. So that's your Nodemonkes, where literally you can see when you go onto Magic Eden, they're like sub 100k inscriptions, meaning that they inscribed like in year 1. You're talking like from December 2022 until sort of February, March time is the first 100k inscriptions. And they're super, super OG. And then you have the narrative of the fact that one really unique thing about inscriptions is it is completely tied to the Satoshi, which is the lowest denomination of a Bitcoin, talking about 10 million Satoshis in a single Bitcoin. And you can inscribe on Satoshis from very, very early on in Bitcoin. And that was another narrative where ZK Shark did it like a lot there, where they were inscribing on Satoshis from like 2009, the first Satoshi that was ever mined, the first one that went to Hal Finney, who was the first transaction, all of these sort of things. So they're the 2 OG narratives that you need to be aware of if you're looking to collect ordinals and take advantage of the runes side. And that's where my head is. So you've got Quantum Cats, which with Taproot Wizards, you know, they inscribed so early and they have a narrative of OGness. OCM got runestones even though they didn't quite meet the criteria. So that's actually really bullish. So OCM is on my list because Danny has been building forever. And although they won ETH, they've been in the Bitcoin,
Sure.
and they were, as soon as Ordinals went, they knew that. Then you have OMB, you have Nodemonkes, you have Puppets, and then there are a few other collections like DGods, for example, who are sub 100k. But because they came from ETH, that's the difficulty right now. Is it projects that came from ETH aren't holding as strong a narrative as people who literally started a collection like ZK on Ordinals.
What would you do? So those are the OG collections. Holding some is obviously potentially very helpful. What is part of the strategy beyond just holding the assets? Is there any part of the strategy beyond holding the assets?
Yeah, then it's really like just any runes drop that has a narrative of being early. So when you mentioned, oh, Nodemonkes haven't been getting these drops, but Orsic is runes. So that's the difference. Is these are like NFTs right now that will eventually turn into rune allocation once it goes live. So if you have like a 20k supply and you know this thing's going to be billions and billions of runes, then because of just the way that traditional meme coins like have in terms of supply, then that's the math people are doing. They're saying, okay, well, if there's only 20k of these, you divide however many billion that will be created by the 20k, you understand the supply. You then say, okay, well, what are the top meme coins on other chains, and you do the math and say, okay, so 20k supply, if this thing flips WIF, I'm looking at X amount of dollars at the end of this, or Bitcoin, because we all love to just hold Bitcoin. So that's the second bit. I'm trying to find the narratives where I believe people have been early enough to runes. There's a real narrative on their understanding of the infrastructure and the technology. And final point is, you mentioned Casey. Casey, to my knowledge, is the person who basically allowed for ordinals through the tech. And then he also is the person who's built out runes. So like when you say Casey is an OG, he's also the person who's like started both of these narratives. So that's why they're holding such historic relevance and such a strong narrative on why you're listening to him, but also why runes are going to be so big as opposed to other protocols, because Ordinals was so big and it's the same guy. Excellent.
Thanks so much for your thoughts, man. Very, very helpful to get people who are like slightly deeper in the ecosystem than us. And I think Akin is definitely one of those people too. So Akin, welcome to the stage, my friend. I think the question to kind of move the conversation forward is not necessarily to go back into the history of ordinals now, or kind of meditate too much on runestones themselves, but just what would you add to the conversation at this point? What do you think is the thing that most people should be aware of that they're not when it comes to runestones and the potential meme coin season on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, you know, first of all, the first thing I'll say is making any references between what's happening in Ethereum and what's going to happen on Bitcoin is the wrong starting point.
Okay.
And I think people need to kind of understand a few basic things, in that what we're seeing happening on Bitcoin is the formation of communities with NFTs or NFT-like assets, inscriptions, ordinals, right? And there's a fundamental thing that people need to understand, in that, you know, on Ethereum, you had fungible tokens and DeFi summer before you had NFT summer. But the reverse is happening on Bitcoin, where you actually have these communities forming. And before, but not only that, if people understand the history of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin sort of went through block size debates and how governance happened on Bitcoin, the power structure on Bitcoin always lay with developers and miners. That is a fundamental shift that's taking place, where communities, right, that are forming networks are actually pulling away some of that power, right? And now that power lies with OMBs, with Nodemonkes, with the communities that are forming with these NFTs. But you also have to remember that NFTs as an ecosystem, right, if you're going to make any parallels with Ethereum, are a fraction the size of DeFi on Ethereum, right? And so the way I think people should think about this is that you have communities forming, right? Communities that have respect, have some political pull, that invariably will get airdrops in this fungible ecosystem that's starting with Rune's protocol. But that's not just it. There are going to be there are other protocols in development. There'll be other protocols built on top of Rune's that would improve its ability to have more smart contract-like properties, such that you actually have the beginnings of what I think is going to be the largest DeFi ecosystem in crypto. And so if you think about it from that size perspective, right, and the way these networks have been forming, where airdrops are giving to OG communities, then the way to think about it is, if you hold some of these key Ordinals assets that have proven to have some level of community interest and networks that are building, then the potential is that you'll earn, or you'll have a front seat into getting airdrops into meme coins. But not only that, as real protocols and real financial infrastructure is built, you will also have a front seat to that. Because the rational thing for projects to do is to tap into the networks and distribution mechanisms that already exist.
Okay,
and so I think...
Can I come in and ask a question for a clarification? Sure. Someone in the YouTube comments has asked this. I think I know what he means, and I think I know what your response is, but I want to give you a chance to come back to it. Oxy, one of our longtime listeners, said, personally, I think what Akin's saying is exactly a connection to ETH, in the sense that I guess what he might be thinking is, well, these communities have been formed around NFTs on ETH anyway. But do you want to speak to that in terms of the order in which things is happening? Because I think that's the key distinction which you're trying to make.
The order matters, definitely, right?
And
I think,
why does the order matter, do you think?
Well, the order matters because I think NFTs, in terms of the way they form community and the way the holder base, particularly in, like, I think Bitcoin, where having access to these OG NFTs is not just a PFP, like that's your access to the network to start off, like, right? So it's a little bit different in that if you hold some of these assets, that's your access pass into everything else that's going to be built. Right, and it gives you an advantage over others who might come in down the line who don't necessarily have these assets, right? And so when you think about it, it's almost sort of like owning property in Manhattan and then being able to lever that up, being able to borrow and invest in the next thing, and being able to be in the networks that give you access to the best deals. Right? I think that's significant. And I think once we start getting into fungible tokens, which I think will be an order of magnitude larger than the NFT marketplaces, the question you should ask yourself is, who gets a front seat into those decentralized projects that will ensue, right? Because you have to also understand, a lot of the builders who are going to build those products and those dApps are also part of these NFT communities, and will distribute these assets first to their folks who have ridden with them from the very beginning. And I think people need to understand that difference, right? And I think as it plays out, you'll find that holding some of these assets will pay multiples back just because you have them, right? Because the likelihood is with the meme coins, you'll just get distribution. But then with the more sort of DeFi financial type protocols as well, you'll also have access. And I think the other thing to also know, one thing I'll also say is, you need to start listening as well to a lot of the early Bitcoiners and a lot of the early investors in Bitcoin, and how the narrative is shifting and how there's more excitement now. Because for the last 5, 6, 7 years, it was all Lightning Network. So much mind share was going to Lightning Network, which I think, for me at this point, is a failure. And so I think as these protocols start launching and you see this interest move, right, you'll see funding moving, you'll see VCs moving, you'll see the narrative changing, because a lot of the guys who were early, who wanted this promise of, just things built on Bitcoin, like, it's taken a long time, but now it's here.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's important to note those things and kind of see those signals from OGs who have been around for the last 10 years.
Thanks very much, man. Really, really interesting perspective. I do think it was helpful just to tease out that distinction, because I've seen a couple of comments suggesting that it is fairly similar on ETH in terms of the community, but I think the point to be made is that DeFi ecosystem just isn't built out yet at all on Bitcoin. So that is the key distinction. But I want to get on to, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm conscious of time. Want to get you the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space, and got to have some headline thoughts from Legendary on Solana just completely ripping to 200. We haven't even spoken about that yet. So want a headline thought on that. maybe some headline point on the $4.3 million Dog WIF Hat sale as well, NFT. So let's get into the roundup from the Snapshot, as always, which is pinned up top. Number one, Slerf raises a $10 million pre-sale and burns it all by accident. Somehow it's ripping though, and Sammy will be able to explain that in a second. Number two, unofficial all-in pod David Sachs and Jason meme coins created over the weekend, and now they're both down quite a lot. Crazy day in the Milady community. The treasury was drained, losing 110 NFTs. The floor declined before then recovering back to 3.4 ETH. Also, Andrew Kang buys the Pepe meme from the 3AC estate in the Sotheby's sale. A couple other pieces of news. Restaking protocol EtherFi announces an airdrop today with pre-trading, valuing the protocol at about 4.5 billion, which is very interesting given that Eigenlayer is coming later in the year. And this is just one of the kind of protocols that facilitates restaking with Eigenlayer. And finally, OSF professional, is it PD5? Professional Degen 5 Magic Eden Mint is planned for today. I believe I'm on the whitelist. I should be minting that a little bit later. And that's the Web3 roundup. We've only got a few minutes left. Legendary, we've had a thorough discussion on Ordinals. I found that really helpful. I hope that was interesting to people too, particularly when it's just kind of strategizing how you want to play the next couple of weeks and months. But we can't end the show without hitting on Solana and maybe even Sammy giving us a bit of an explanation on Slerf. So let's go to Sammy first. Quick TLDR on how Slerf is ripping, despite the fact that the guy seemed to have raised a pre-sale for $10 million, burned it all by accident. What's going on there? And then want to go to Legendary for some headline thoughts on Solana.
Yeah, just to clarify that it's no longer ripping, so it's kind of gone down quite significantly since. But yeah, so there's speculation as to whether this guy just pulled a marketing stunt, a $10 million marketing stunt, but everyone seemed to jump on the bandwagon. He jumped on some spaces, started crying on the spaces. And it just went full send to about, I think it's about 700 million market cap. He's since gone to sleep because I think it's probably about 7 a.m. and I don't think they've slept. So maybe that's why it's kind of slowly trickling down. And I think it is one of those things where it's an attention economy. So I didn't hear about this thing until probably about, well, to be honest, until I woke up this morning, just saw it first thing all over the timeline. But yeah, I think the 10 million burn was pretty savage. I don't think I've seen anything like that since, probably it reminds me of the Kevin Pixelmon moment, just that reveal. So I think it could potentially go down as like an iconic piece in the Solana ecosystem at some point. But, I don't know. I think Bybit were on that spaces. There was speculation that would be listed on Bybit. I don't know whether it has or not. Someone else in the YouTube comments has mentioned that there was a Binance rumor listing, but I don't know. I think there has to be a lot more volume for it to hit that level. So yeah, but I think there's been 1.4 billion in 24-hour volume, so it's not a small amount by any means.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Obviously, the market is just wild for this type of stuff at the moment. I'd love to just get some feedback on whether people want us to do these kind of rundowns. It's kind of boring to me on some level where it's just like, okay, another crazy thing, another pump and dump, basically. I'm not entirely sure that I want to spend too much time covering this type of stuff in general, but would love like broader feedback on that, because I think there's more important things going on because it's going to be in the news today and then gone tomorrow, right? So I don't know, would love some further reflection on that. Legendary, hit us with the headline thought on Solana, ripping past $200 in the past 24 hours, 35% up on the week, 10% up in 24 hours. Like, what's the play here? What are we thinking about Solana outperforming absolutely everything? Close the show out with your takes here.
Look, I think that's all very much connected to that meme coin season, because even connecting it back to the Ordinals discussion that we had into the second tweet that you shared by Renegade Master, when you said, when they said in the post that many people don't understand runes and the BTC is so much bigger and meme coins will be so big. The issue is when you have to understand a meme coin the issue is when you have to understand a meme coin, period. Like, there's nothing to understand about it. Slerf burned 10 million of the deposits that have been sent. Degens were thinking, wouldn't it be fun if this is the one coin to then actually rip, and sent it all the way, as Sammy said, to 700 mil. Decadente raised 30 mil close to pre-sale hours ago, and someone just sent during the show another 1,700 SOL to a already closed pre-sale, which is utterly insane. And the ease of trading, the greed with the meme coin casino, and the accessibility of it definitely gives a lot of tailwind to Solana in itself. Because if you then look at the headline numbers and you see, oh, DeFi TVL has surpassed Arbitrum, trading volume of Jupiter has surpassed Uniswap. That's obviously carried by the meme coin casino that everyone's playing, but that has an impact on the underlying asset, aka Solana.
Love it. I think that is a wonderful final analysis. We have reached the end of today's show. We are so grateful that you joined us for it. Hope you enjoyed. Just a little notice for all of you. We are obviously run the show 7 a.m. Eastern time every single day. We're live on X. We're live on YouTube. We are also now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Spotify, you can watch the video. Apple Podcasts is just audio only. Please do go there. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe. If you want to give us 5 stars, you can give us 5 stars. If you want to give us less than 5 stars, don't bother. You can do something else with your time. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much to my co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our speakers, as always. We had NFTStats, Akin, Oxy, Funky, and Jack. And thank you so much for everyone else joining us in the audience. We appreciate you. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.